Would you think pursuing communications would be more important than, say, pursuing a business degree and then maybe get an MBA after the fact if they wanted to do this? Or
You're not gonna like my opinion. Do you really want to hear it?
I certainly do. Today I have Candace McPhee with me, and it's time we discuss culture and change management. Candace, thank you for joining me today.
Hi there. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. How are you this afternoon?
Very good too. Thanks.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So let's talk about life working at a company where you're doing change management or culture management. What was the day to day like?
So typically, how a project would work with change management is someone would come to you and say, "Okay, Candice, I'm doing a technical implementation. We're changing the furniture in the office. We are, doing a merger." Whatever it would be, they would come to me and say, "Okay, this is what we're doing. I need you to tell me what is going to be the impact to the people who are involved in the change." So that would always be the first question. And then the most amusing part would always be, "Well, I'm sure it's going to be these three things." And I would say, "Yeah, okay, that's great." And then what your job is to go away and talk to people and listen, just asking questions, a lot of listening, talking to what we refer to as key stakeholders, anybody who would be impacted by it. And then you listen to what they have to say. After that, you compile all that information, boil it down, and put it into a stakeholder analysis to say, okay, these are the stakeholders. This is how they're impacted. And then you usually do like yourself to make it real simple, like a red, yellow, green thing to say, okay, super high, medium, low. And then what you would do next is dive down further to say, what are they impacted? Is it their day-to-day work that's impacted? Is it the systems that they use? What do they need? Do they need training? Do they need communication? Do they need to learn something completely new? Right? So then you put together your change plan, which would be all of the activities that you have to do to take those stakeholders and move them from a place where they're not really excited about what's coming to a space where they can just continue their day-to-day without being impacted. One of the things that people used to laugh when I tell them, I'd say, "Well, I don't care if they like it. I want them to just know how to use it." Right? If they like it, it's not my responsibility. What my responsibility is to make sure that whenever it clicks up and it opens up, that everyone can say, "I know how to do this. I'm not wasting any of my time. I can just get right into it." And they're comfortable. They don't have to like it, but they're comfortable and they know what they have to do.
That makes sense. Okay, so from what you're describing, it almost reminds me of when I worked with project managers. Does working in this capacity is it similar to project management? Is there overlap? What's that like?
It's kind of like the perfect marriage, if you will. The project manager is the one who's there organizing all the plates. If the smart project manager will bring the change manager along with them to pretty much everything, their lead. And then they would make sure that they were in on all the conversations. They understood what's going on. The change manager to me is the sort of the silent observer. I could sit in a room and I could start to see, like, if people start to they start to, like move around a bit in their chair, or they, the kind of questions, the tone gets a little more aggressive. Those are all things you have to take on, right? Those are things you have to manage because, again, goal, everybody just being okay with what click on day. So those are all things, and sometimes it's a conversation, sometimes it's like a corporate training plan, sometimes it's the VP going and talking to everyone. Whatever it is, it's a catered program that needs to be designed for everyone to get to their safe space. So yes, they do work hand in hand with the project manager.
Okay, so Candace, I was recently speaking with Doug Lawrence. He was actually a mentor. And we talked about what it was like to be a mentor, and he was talking about very similarly. It's very much listening and having communication, but there's a lot of listening involved. And I said this to him because what you said kind of reminds me of this. How much of a background in like psychology or like a behavioral, not behavioral analysis, but understanding behavior? How important is that to what you do or what you did working as a change manager?
Yeah, that's pretty important. I do not have background in that. I have an MBA with a focus on change management, specifically change transformation from a strategy perspective. So that's where I kind of got my information from. I think I don't disagree. That would completely help. But when I was hiring, because I had a team of about 20, 30 people, depending on how busy we were. And typically it's what we call the change heart. And it sounds really silly, but for me, it's that intuitive person who's going to watch. It's the person. And the thing about a change manager is you are like, I always think about it in terms of, if the president's out there talking, you were the one walking with them to the podium to say, okay, don't forget to say this, don't forget to say that, and don't forget to say that. And they go out there. And then when they come back, you say, okay, your tone was a bit off with this. And next time we're going to have to address this. That's who the change manager is. The change manager is the person helping that, executive, president, whoever, make sure that they're reaching people. I can tell you how many times I sat in the senior executive's office at their computers going, okay, I'm just typing a thank you note from you. So, and they're like over there doing something else. I go, yeah, that's good. But you learn to talk in the voice of the people that you're doing. You can't say those things in your voice. So you really have to have this intuition in terms of how to say things in the right way. And constant feedback loop, constantly taking on board, conversations that you hear, whether they're in the hallway or in a meeting room, and then reapplying them to your plan, saying, okay, well, this isn't working because we've had 5 people come back to us and say they're not happy. So we need a deeper thing. We need another conversation. We have, there's so many different tools you can use to make a change more comfortable for folks, and you just have to keep at it and keep an iterative loop until you're through.
You mentioned that you have an MBA. For an undergrad degree, if someone is going to college or university, what degree would be most beneficial from your opinion? Because you talked about communications, essentially. You talked about speaking in someone's voice. I've spoken with Laura Nals, was a communicator, and she talked about how important that was, and several other people have talked about how important communication was and how transferable that was from one industry to another, or even one job to another. So would you think pursuing communications would be more important than, say, pursuing a business degree and then maybe get an MBA after the fact if they wanted to do this? Or what's your opinion on that?
You're not going to like my opinion. Do you really want to hear it?
I certainly do.
My opinion on an undergraduate degree is get the undergraduate degree you want, and something that interests you. In 5 years' time, it'll be what it is, right? And your work experience will have shaped you more than that undergrad degree was. What your undergraduate degree does, in my opinion, it breaks you out. It forces you to get 10 books when you don't have time to read 10 books. And it forces you to take a test that you have to prepare with those 10 books. And it forces you to make decisions, get priorities, manage your time, understand how to manage large amounts of work, understand how to write a paper, understand deadlines. It teaches you that. From my perspective, unless you want to be an engineer or want to be a lawyer or want to be something specific, I would prefer if folks got a degree in something that they're passionate about and something that inspired their learning and inspired them to want to go to school and want to do better and understood how to put things together. Because once you have that undergraduate degree, no one can take that from you. That undergraduate degree is yours. That learning experience is yours. That is always yours, whatever package it comes in. And for me, I would have never discriminated against someone unless they wanted to be an engineer and they didn't take an engineering undergrad. But I would never discriminate on someone because if they had successfully completed it, then I know they've gone through the steps that are, for me, are critical to have a good employee.
It's very interesting that you say that. I was speaking with confidence coach Tamara, and we talked about education, and I remember she said, well, I did have, how she phrased it? She was like, I was a teacher, or I'm no longer a teacher. And then she paused and she's like, well, technically I still have the degree. You can't take that away from me. That kind of mentality. Just what you're saying kind of reminded me of that. And I think it's very interesting, that perspective you have. And I appreciate that honest candor about having the college degree and what you can do with it. And similar to going back to what Laura Nals was saying, it was kind of like the same idea. It was like, as long as you know how to write, you can B, you can do something involved with communications.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that. I love hearing that, having the quote unquote piece of paper or not having the piece of paper, might not hold you back. I love instances like that.
I don't think it will. And then once you kind of get on your career path, whatever you start with, and then however you kind of tic-tac-toe through your career, for me, an MBA was different. An MBA for me hit when I felt like I had worked for 5 or 6 years and I felt like, oh, I felt like I was missing something. I feel like if I'm involved in a strategic discussion, I don't feel like I can give you my best answers because I don't kind of get how it all fit together. I really was more mature in my competencies, in my ability to deliver as an employee and as like an active citizen in a meeting or whatever. And I just felt that I would benefit at that point from really sort of heavy, intense understanding of how the organization fits together. For me, when I did that, I just jumped right in and I said, I am getting everything out of this. And I did. I felt stronger, more mature, better able to understand a business problem, quicker to provide solutions, quicker to understand what we needed to do. I was able to use all the tools again that I got from that and just to deliver quicker, faster, stronger, and a lot more confident in what I could lead, what I could do.
Let's talk about you exiting corporate. What happened there? Was it bored of it? You got everything out of it that you could? Was it the environment was no longer suited for you? What was the exit like for that?
I was working 60 hours a week at a large team. I was working on a large merger.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. How common is that as a change manager to be working over 40 hours a week? How common is that?
Again, we talk culture. It could be the organization culture. It could be the what you're working on. It could be flexibility. I didn't have any problem with it. I was well versed in working lots of hours. I think where the cracks started to happen was my kids were getting older. I have 3 kids. They were getting to the point where I think my youngest maybe was 9. I had 9 to 13-year-old, 3 kids, one in the middle. And it was, I just looked at them and went, gosh, they're growing up so quickly. What have I done? I think I said, what have I done? Because I had a nanny, I had a gardener, I had someone shoveling my driveway. I had all the help, right? But I got half an hour in the morning and half an hour at night with my kids. And I just went, okay, I did not have kids for other people to raise them. That was the first one. That was where it started to tick away. The second thing was all of the hours started to get a lot. And it just, for the longest time, I would get up and I would be so energized for my day and so excited. But this merger was a lot. It was busy. People stopped talking when I got in the elevator. It had this real negative cloud. And it just got to a point for me where the buzz and that addictive sort of adrenaline rush you get from when you're doing a really good job at work stopped being as important as missing out at home. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. Yes, it does.
And that rush was really hard to let go of. It's an addictive, right? When you are good at what you do, and I was good, like I was good. I'm not one to boast at all, and I would never for so many things, but at that job, I was awesome. And I could just do it and deliver and deliver. And it was just this sort of, you just wear it, like just this buzz of getting, doing good work. And, but it just tipped out and it didn't fulfill me the same way. And I realized how much of my life I was missing. So that's when I quit.
And then you eventually transitioned and you became an author. You started writing. So talk to me about that. How did that all start?
Well, that started 25 years ago when I actually took this backpacking trip for a year around the world. And it was shortly after my mom died. There was lots of emotions and lots of things going on. And I just needed to get lost for a while so I could find myself. And I wrote in journals while I was doing it. And I put the journals on the shelf. And after I quit, I dusted them off and said, okay, what can I make of these? And then started my most humbling journey to date, which is writing, because I thought being the queen of PowerPoints and the queen of organizing and, someone who can just, make stuff hum, that I could write a book. And let me tell you, they are not the same competency at all. And it is a very, very, very different from a sort of summation PowerPoint where you want to get to, conclude everything, is not, it's just so different than how you write. And it was a very humbling journey to learn this new competency. But let me tell you, I was really excited about it. It had been a long time, probably since my MBA, that I had really learned something new and really challenged and really sitting there going, I don't think I'm doing the, just questioning yourself, but then sort of dragging yourself through and saying, no, this is it. You gotta get down. You gotta do this. So, yeah, it took years before I published my first book because okay, so maybe I'm a bit of an ego. I did not want to put my name on something that wasn't like the absolute best work I could do. And it took a while to get to the absolute best work. Let's put it that way.
The one thing you said about that reminded me of, so I was speaking with Dr. Jo Lukens. She's a sports psychologist based in Australia. And she was talking about, I want to say it was also writing, but I can't remember for sure. It's been so long at this point. But she said, and I can relate to this, when you have a creative project and you put your heart and soul into it, it's almost like hanging your underwear out to dry, like in the backyard. It's very exposing, for lack of better words, and it can be hard when you have that creative part of you, and it's so out there for everyone. So I can understand what you're saying with that. And it took years. So let's hang on that for a second. How did you get past that? Because I've read online with different people on different social platforms, people talking about like how to start doing this or doing that. It's so hard to get started because they're self-conscious, they're afraid, whatever. How did you blast past that?
That was probably the easy part, was getting started, because I had I had the books, I had the raw material, if you will. So I was able to, and structuring was always something I was good at. So I could structure like no tomorrow, and I understood in terms of direction what I wanted to achieve. So I had all those sort of underpinning things. What I didn't have was an appreciation for how to turn a series of diary entries into a compelling story. And that's where I needed to get help. So I interviewed, found the right person to help me, because I think I wasn't as naive to think I could do this all on my own. And I had to find the right person who had the right competencies in terms of how to write. Whether it's the art of writing, it's a completely different skill, and figure out how to do that. And it took time, it took perseverance, it took just sitting at your computer. When you write an email or you write a letter to someone, how many times, like, if you really want to make sure it's precise, it takes a couple hours. Like, you could sit there for a while and compose it and go, okay, well, this doesn't make sense in this order, I'll put it over here. And writing is very much the same way for me. To get, I could spend all day on 4 pages, and and just to get them just so, and make sure the words are the right words, and to make sure that the scene is in line with the arc, and that it all goes together. And those are things I just didn't even consider before. So it was a real learning journey.
Where did you go to find this help? Did you just search Google and it turned up, writing help? Or did you network with people and discover that? How did you find that help you were looking for?
So I started with books I liked, and I looked at in the cover to see who they had helped them. And then I reached out to those people, and I had a couple referrals. At that point, I started to do interviews, and no one seemed to get what I wanted. Everyone, they all went, that's great, but you should do this. And I went, no, you know what? I don't know how to write, but I know what I want to write. So I think there was a real distinction there around the product that I wanted to deliver versus the help that I needed. And it was a lot of perseverance. And at the end of the day, my mom would laugh. It's not what you know, it's who you know. I happen to know a pretty famous author who lives here in Calgary. and reached out to her, and she recommended someone. So I got a personal recommendation at the end because I was very specific in telling her, and she said, "Oh, I think you need this person." And then I went and I did meet that person. So I found the right partner. And I think it's like anything. It's like a relationship. It's like, it's like anything. You can't just sort of settle for the first person. And if they're, they treat you badly, in terms of the first editors I spoke to thought, oh, well, this is what, nope, that's not what I need. And I did the same process with line editing and grammatical editing too.
That is really, really good information. Thank you for sharing that. I am running a little short on time, but whenever I'm speaking with someone, I do like to give them the opportunity to talk about a project they're working on, a cause they believe in. So if you want to talk more about your books or something else, kind of leave it open-ended. Candace, the floor is yours.
Well, just probably the books. That's what I'm working on at the moment, when I spend most of my time and at my computer by myself. Yes, I have 2 books out already, and the books are they take place in the 90s, because that's when I backpacked back in the day, and it's called the Back in the Years series, and each book kind of covers a different geographical area and also sort of a different area of growth. I think it's interesting from a perspective of anyone who's taken the trip but didn't write it down, anyone who wants to travel, anyone who's thinking of traveling, or just if you want a funny read. I left all the ridiculous things in there. It's funny, it's time bound, it's internet cafes and, trying to find your way around using a lonely planet, and just crazy situations, and just friendships and relationships, and all boiled into one. So those are what the book is. The first one's called Finding Color, and then there's Life Strikes Back, and I'm just working on my third one, which is Hello, I Am Here. And that one goes to the Middle East, and that name I borrowed from the locals, who would shout a lot of obscenities when you walk by. But the most comfortable one that I heard was, "Hello, I'm here." So they would all sort of try to get your attention. So I borrowed that, and that's what the book's called.
That is awesome. Candace, I'll make sure I get links to all those. I'll put them in the show notes, so when people are trying to find you, they can easily locate you. Candace, it's been absolutely awesome having you on Time to Discuss. We learned what it's like to be a change manager, and also more about being an author.